the first question is, what is your name?
My name is Cindy Matthews.
No middle name?
Well, my full real name is Cynthia Dean Sorensen Matthews.
Okay.
And I'm Charles Arthur Matthews. That's my legal name.
Yeah.
And I go by Chuck.
Go by Cindy.
Where do you know where your parents came up with your names?
Yeah, oh, I know mine.
Yeah, my mother, there's a whole story behind that. My mom and dad hadn't really decided on a name, and then somehow she heard about Cynthia. My middle name is Dean, which is after my dad's older sister. And but the Cynthia part, I guess he got it wrong. I was the first baby, and he was very young, and my mom was young as well. And he thought she said Sheridith instead of Cynthia. So he was telling everybody my name was Sheridith. Luckily he was wrong. Cynthia's a snooty enough name.
And then my situation was my mom's younger brother was Charles Stevenson, and he went through most of his life as Buddy, but it was Charles, so I was Chuck because I didn't want to be a Charles, going through life. And my middle name Arthur was my dad's first name, Arthur G. Matthews. So that's how that one came up.
So family names and then just their favorite names.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's your hometown, Cindy?
I was born in San Fernando, California. It's a little town in what is the San Fernando Valley. Yeah.
And what do you remember most about your hometown?
Well, I was trying to think what my earliest memories were, and they were actually of being outside the hospital where my brother, who's 3 years younger than me, was born. And I was with my dad looking up into the window, which seemed high, but I don't think that hospital really was high, just I was 3, so. And I remember being at that hospital, trying to meet my brother. My brother was born premature, so he was kept in there for a long time in an incubator. So I figured there was no real brother there. They were trying to show me what it looked like. Yeah.
And then Chuck, where's your hometown?
Well, West LA, West Los Angeles, and my parents moved in before I was born. They had 2 other children by that time, and they moved in with her dad, because he had a big house in West LA, and he just was he needed other people around just to help maintain it and stuff like that. So we lived there until I was about 6, and that was on Hobart Street, and I remember it because it had a little, it was a nice area, and it was a comfortable old bungalow that was built in about 1910, and fond memories of all that, and the neighbors and all that kind of thing. We had a little market close by, about a block and a half away, Baker's, and you could go down and get a cola for a nickel or whatever it was. And the elementary school, Hobart Elementary, was only about 2 blocks away down the street, and I went there for kindergarten and 1st grade. Mrs. Matthews, same name as mine, was my first teacher, and she was also my Uncle Chuck's teacher. So she had been around the block for a while, and Mrs. Herdink. How do you forget a name like that?
Herdink?
Herdink. And before we moved to the San Fernando Valley in Tarzana, and to my parents' second house, because they had another house before they moved into the Hobart with my grandfather, and then we stayed in the San Fernando Valley until I left. Yeah.
You have a good memory. I mean, really.
Anything current, not so much. No, just.
What were some of your favorite things to do as a child, younger age, like before high school?
Oh, yeah. Well, in my childhood, there's like two distinct families. There's my brother who's 3 years younger than me. And then there's a big gap before my sister and my other brother. And their lives were so completely different from mine, my early childhood, because my parents were young and were renters, so they kept moving from place to place, because my dad would fix the place up because he was a carpenter. And so we moved a lot, which was not a very stable thing for little kids. And I was thinking last night, when I was about 5, we moved into a neighborhood, must have been 6. And I loved that neighborhood because it was kind of wild and woolly. I'm sure it was a poverty neighborhood. Because I remember looking back as an adult that, you know, Christmas time, we wouldn't have gotten gifts probably if it hadn't been for grandparents stepping up. Because I remember one year my mother took my favorite doll and had it at the doll hospital spruced up. So that was what, but you know, we were kids, we didn't care. And what was neat about that neighborhood was there was a big field that we played in all the time. This is before people had televisions. I mean, they were out there, but not very many people had them. And if we were stuck in the house or it was a rainy day, we couldn't wait for the rain to stop to be outside again. So it was all outside stuff. There was a little creek that we played in. I can't imagine me allowing my kids to run wild like that. And there was also a wash that flooded from time to time, but we would play in there. And all the kids in the neighborhood got poison ivy or poison oak from that creek at one point. And the cool thing about it was we didn't have to go to school. But all we did was itch, so we still played outside and had a great time with all of us itchy kids together. That was a good memory. And we moved a lot. So that we were in that house for probably 2 years, and then we moved, and we often moved mid-school year. So we were always the new kids coming in, which was, you know, kind of made me a pushy person. My brother was very shy, so he didn't acclimate as well. And then when I was about 9 or 10, my mother was pregnant with my sister, and at that time my dad got on the fire department. And so our lives changed, because then we had stable income. It wasn't seasonal like it was for my dad before that. My sister always joked that I wore the clothes that my grandmother made for me. My sister shopped in boutiques. It's just different. And the other thing was, we had one school in all of our moves that my brother and I both really liked, Hubbard Elementary School. And so when my dad got in the fire department, they were able to afford to buy a house. And so they sold us on giving up our dream of living in this other house that they were going to build on property and kind of a farm thing, to, if we buy this house in Sylmar, you'll be able to go to Hubbard Street School. So that's what we did, and they bought that house, and they were there until their retirement.
Okay.
What do you like to do? Probably similar stuff, the playing outside.
Oh, yeah. Our first house, at least the first house for me at my grandfather's house, until I was about 6, that was great because there was kids in the neighborhood. It was an older part. There wasn't a new development out in the valley or anything, but it was still good for having kids around. I remember the lady next door, Ann Zucker. She was, I thought she was really aged. She's probably younger than I am right now. But
It's always fun.
everything's relative. But she had a beautiful backyard, and she had roses and all that kind of stuff, and a nice hat and what have you. And it was kind of fun. And we had a loquat tree in the backyard, and my brother and I would climb up to that thing and pick all that stuff even before it was ripe. And it was still great fun. We moved to the San Fernando Valley when I was going into 2nd grade. So, because they started school really young at 4 or 4 and a half. I was about 6 years old by that time. And we lived in Tarzana, California, on a street called Cahill. And my brother and I always shared a bedroom. My sister had her, she was the oldest child, she had her own, and my parents had their own. House was probably about 1,100 square feet, maybe. And after they had lived there several years, they changed the garage, which was in the front with a kind of coming into it like that, into a playroom, rumpus room, catch-all room. And it was great. It had a lot of lumber and great ceilings, and we had great parties in that area and what have you. We built another garage in the back. It was a great lot because it was pretty big size. Walnut tree in the back. Great friends that lived in, the neighborhood, because in fact, the neighborhood right now, my sister still lives in it because several streets away. So I go by that house, and it went from a house that was bought for about $12,000 to about $2 million, just because inflation and being in LA and all, or in San Fernando Valley. But yeah, my parents were cautious to a certain degree. We had a cabin up at Lake Arrowhead, learned how to swim there. Lived in we went to a beach called Emerald Bay, and we could swim out about a half mile across the bay and around the bend. And I remember going out there with my brother and my mom and my mom and dad would go along too. My sister sometimes as well. And it was just a real neat thing. We didn't have, the docks were kind of far apart, and the well-to-do people had those places, and we were just middle class. But there was plenty of space for us, and we had great summers up there, and sometimes we'd go up there in the wintertime. 3-story place, kind of on the side of a hill, and it was built, several years, a long time before that time. What's up?
I was wondering where that picture is that your mom painted of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it right behind me, back there. But anyway, we have fond memories of that, and they sold it when I was probably about 13, so they could buy another house on Mulholland Drive in Woodland Hills, and that made sense. But I was just really starting to dig it by that time. But we still had a wonderful time when we moved out to the Woodland Hills area. And I might mention, kind of like Cindy, your parents didn't have to worry about you so much when you were younger. San Fernando Valley now has probably close to 2 million people. At that time, not even close to that. And so I would go with my friends, and we would ride our bicycles all over the place, 10, 15 miles.
And that was hilly too.
And busy, and stuff like that. And I think back, and of course I did crazy things when I got a little bit older than that, but it came through it unscathed. So that was nice. I would say that my childhood was really good. Really good. Had great friends, good teachers. I love my parents, love my brother and sister. So it was really good.
That's nice. Not everybody can say that.
No, not at all.
And I don't think I asked you guys what your birthdays were. And some people hate to tell their age, but then we can put reference on your name because LA is a humongous area.
It was rural when we were
right
up there.
Yeah.
It's not rural at all anymore. It's just one town after the next, bumping in. There's no borders. It's just, you can't even tell one town from the other now. Yeah. I was born in 1948.
What was your actual birthday?
September 1st.
And I was born January 16th, 1945. At Rose Memorial Hospital in Los Angeles. My doctor's name, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, man, you have the best memory. You'll know this. Who was your best friend growing up? What was their name? Do you remember?
Yeah, right down the street from me, there was a kid. He's probably Harold or Hiram or something like that, but he was Spooky Levy.
You called him Spooky?
Spooky because he was born on Halloween.
Oh,
And
okay.
he was my best bud when for 5 and 6 years old and what have you. And then after that, Duffy Lipsky lived down the street. Used to box with him and what have you. And Gary.
Sorry.
That's all right. I just don't want to scare
Oh, is he going to attack you?
He's
Down,
growling.
easy.
Darling.
No, it was good. It was, and yeah, I had a lot of friends because the whole valley, all those houses came in at the same time, and there was a development of probably 130 houses or so. And there's a lot of war babies, like, I was born just after the World War II ended. And so there are a lot of them my age. And then, just like now, you go to not elementary for me, in the second grade in Tarzan Elementary, all the way up through Sequoia Junior High. I knew the same kids. They were coming in from further away as you get into the higher grades and what have you, but it was fun.
So did you go to school with anybody the whole time? From kindergarten to senior year?
Kindergarten, no. Kindergarten was different because I was in LA for me. Let's see, Jimmy Queso. Gosh darn, Jimmy Queso. Neat guy, lived a couple of streets away from me. Oh, actually, right in the street behind me. And he was a smaller guy, kind of stocky. And we had a lot of fun together. And then we moved, and my family moved out to Mulholland Drive, and I went to Taft High School, and he went to Reseda High. And I played B football because I was shorter and smaller, but it was fun. I was a guard and a tackle. And I remember having a game with Reseda, and I tackled my friend.
That's fun.
Well, I didn't mean, it was just one of those things. But Jimmy was a quarterback, and it was great. And I met him again after I had come back from being in the service and what have you. And he had gone to Vietnam, and I was fortunate enough to be sent to Germany instead. So, but we still, could reminisce, and it was great fun. We went to UCLA and had a class there, and
So you knew him a long time.
sure.
How about you, Cindy? Or did you, and with all the moving around, after you were 9 though, and you guys kind of stayed in the same place?
Once we were in the same neighborhood, there were people that I knew for longer periods of time. But I would say it set a pattern for me not to really make those long-term connections. Like my mom had her best friend from the time she was a little girl.
I remember her talking
Yeah,
about the
Peggy.
dollhouse or the playhouse.
We always
yeah.
called her Aunt Peggy because she was, so close to my mom. But I didn't really, I had friends in high school, and my mom was a Mormon convert, so a lot of our social life was focused at the church activities and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Yeah, I had friends, but I have one friend that I've known since Hubbard Street Elementary, 5th or 6th grade, Donna, and we're still friends.
That's nice. Did you have a favorite teacher that inspired you or affected you?
I remember that. For myself, in the 5th grade, I had Mr. Cummings, and he was just one of those people that he was interesting, and he made all the subjects interesting. So I probably went from a C student to an A student, and just because I just absorbed what he said. And I looked forward to going to his class. And then in high school, I had a Mr. Snyder that had been in the Korean conflict, and he would carry like a bullwhip around just to keep anybody out of, so he wouldn't misbehave. But he had great stories about history and what have you, and that just made it more interesting, not so dry.
So that would make it interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, really bring it to life.
World history, I had the worst teacher in high school, Mr. Edelstein. And he was one of those guys, memorized the dates and the whatever. It had no relevance, had no interest in it. I've never been interested in history, and I think partly because of him being such a horrible teacher. I had a good one, Mr. Skurloff, 6th grade. And there were some that were good, Somebody that really super stands out, Mr. Galen, I guess, in junior high, was a good English teacher.
Well, one standing out for bad is standing out too.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, if you don't like history, I bet that's probably part of it. It really does make a difference when somebody brings it to life. Do you guys have pets when you were kids?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll start. I had a friend, Billy Lowe, and we were in about the 5th grade, and he lived a half mile from me. And he had his dog had a litter, and I went over there and he said, you can take a dog. And I don't remember asking my parents about this because we didn't have one at the time. So I got this little black, hairy little guy, and he had marks above his eyebrows and his paws and his muzzle, and it was kind of a burnt orange, I don't know, kind of a orangey color. And or rusty color, and we called him Baltar, and Baltar was a figure in Prince Valiant, and Baltar was a Viking warrior with a big red beard, and he was the right-hand man for Prince Valiant. But yeah, we had Baltar until he was probably about 17.
Oh, you lived a
So
long
a
time.
long time, yeah. And he had quite a reputation.
Did you have cats named Roger?
Oh, yeah. My parents always had a cat, and it was always Roger, and I don't know where that started, but it started. And but Baltar was, he would sleep with either myself or my brother, and kind of a mangy guy. It's amazing. We didn't get mange ourselves, but he was a wonderful dog. But he had a reputation as being really mean, and I think he got excited when other people were around. And I remember the mailman came to the door when they had and I think Mom opened the door, and Baltar went out and bit him, and then ran back real quick. And I'm thinking, gosh darn, this is going to be terrible. They're going to have to put him down. But nothing happened like that. But even funnier was there was a dog, a neighbor had a dog that was a Chihuahua. And our dog got out and saw the Chihuahua and started chasing it. I thought the game was over. And the Chihuahua got tired running away, turned around, made a stand. Chased my dog back. My dog was probably about 45 pounds, and the Chihuahua was probably half this guy's size, and it was just hilarious. And it was good stuff. Good stuff. Go ahead.
So they had more than one cat named Roger, though?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that is funny. Just replace the cat. Same
not
name.
Not at the same time.
Yeah, just a new one.
Here's Roger. Oh, Roger. It wasn't like they were dying early. They just, I don't know.
Always had a cat named Roger.
I guess that's the case.
That's
Yeah.
funny. Roger was my dad's name, so that's why
Oh,
that piqued my interest. I'm like, really? Because usually that's the fun thing, is come up with a new name for an animal, but
Sure.
that is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, his parents were really interesting people. My parents were, my dad was a carpenter. He could do anything with his hands, and was a fireman and that kind of stuff, but they didn't have any high degree of education or anything, but his parents were really big thinkers, and I learned a lot from them. And pets, when I was young, because we moved so much, I guess we didn't really get pets, but I remember at Easter time, they would get a chick or a duck, and we'd have this little cage in the back that they'd be in, but cats would always get them. It was very traumatic. Never get your kids ducks or chicks. What were they thinking? I don't know. My parents were young. But we did get a Siamese cat. Because I remember it was in that same neighborhood with the field and the creek and all that kind of stuff. And that cat's name was Ping, from a book that we read together. And Ping liked to climb up inside the car near the engine to get warm, and I guess she got stuck in there and something bad happened, and she was pregnant, and so we had to choose between her and nothing. And so they were able to save her, and I don't know for how long though. I don't think we had her much longer. But the first real pet we had was once my parents got that house, bought their own house. We had a dog that was a Cocker Spaniel, black Cocker Spaniel, Shadow. And pets weren't allowed in the house. But there was a back porch. He could stand in the back porch. Of course, he snuck in when my dad wasn't around. But yeah, and that dog was just part of the family. If we had a sleeping bag, he knew we were going to go camping. He would not get out of the car. Get in that car and just stay there. Even if we were just going to a friend's house. So he went camping with us. He went horseback riding with us. He did everything with us. It was a really great family pet. We had a couple of cats, Pierre and Marie, named after the Curies. So I guess I was studying something in science
Like
about
that.
them. We had those cats, but that was it. Oh, Sonny Boy, the canary. My mom had a canary for many years, Sonny Boy.
I might mention what my dad did and what my mom did. My mom was a housewife, domestic engineer, and
an artist.
until I was in about 10th grade, I guess, or maybe 9th grade, and then she went to work. But my dad was a title artist, and he did the titles like Shane or something like that. And they didn't do it by machine, or they didn't have it done. Well, he did it all the time that he was working, and he worked for National Screen or Paramount. And we have some of his things that he did, or things my mom did for him, because she was a better fine artist. And my mom went to work, and she worked for Hanna-Barbera, which was a big animation company in North Hollywood.
That's
The
cool.
Flintstones.
That's I remember
Yeah.
at the end of the Flintstones and the Jetsons.
All
Yogi
that.
Bear.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
She became the head of the ink and paint department, and that's when it was all done. Each cell was painted and all that kind of stuff, and eventually that went overseas, and then it became automated and all that kind of thing. So both my parents' professions eventually would have been stopped,
Taken over by
but they
computerization.
were able to do it until they retired, and that was good.
That's where they met, right, in art school.
Yeah, they met at art school, yeah. And I want to mention too, because cars, at least play cars and then motor cars later on, were such a big thing. And my brother was he's 3.5 years older than myself. And he would be a great builder of soapbox derbies and stuff like that. Not the kind that competes on that, but we competed in the neighborhood. And whoever got the great axles and wheels from the local General Motors dealership, which were soapbox derby wheels, we could beat anybody. But being that I was smaller, I was the driver. And we had some great cars. I remember one, we had the Matthews Modified Monster. And my dad painted it, had a flame job on a white car. And a big Buick steering wheel in there, and I think I wore a shell of a World War II helmet on it, But we took it to, I think my brother took it, my dad wouldn't have let me do this. We went to Pierce College, which was a JC in the valley, and it had a stadium up in the hill, and then you came down this parking lot, and down this big road, and it was quite the hill. And I went down there before we had gone to the real fast wheels. Just had some wheels off of a wagon, wagon it. And so it could probably do about 35 or something like that down the hill. And I had to come into this corner. It's a good thing I wasn't bigger. So anyway, I came in and it flipped. And I just tucked under it. And another time I come out smelling like a rose. But we had such great fun doing that stuff.
Just picturing you. I thought you were going to say the wheels fell off. You were going so fast. That's
Well, I
why.
had one of those situations.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I was picturing, but I like that you tucked and rolled. That was good.
Yeah.
What's your brother? What are your siblings' names? I don't think you've just said you had.
You got more than I do.
Yeah, I have two brothers. They're all younger than me. I'm the oldest kid. And so the one that's just younger than me, his name is John Kimball. He's always gone by Kim. Kimball's a family name. And my next sibling, several years younger than me, is my sister Valerie. And then my youngest is my brother Robert. Rob lives, well, both my brothers live here now.
Oh, nice. Where's your sister at?
She's in California, Northern California.
And the oldest one is my sister, Carolyn Joyce, and she goes by Joyce. And my brother is Richard Stephen, goes by Dick. And it was neat having a brother that much older. I was exposed to his friends, and we had a lot of fun doing things all together. And then, and of course, I had my own group of friends as well. My sister was 7 years older, and it was fun because when she was young and a teenager, she would have the boys come over and what have you. And they had some neat cars, and I was still in the cars at an early age. But yeah, and she lives in Tarzana now, and my brother lives in Thousand Oaks with his family, and yeah, they have two kids. My sister had one, and everybody in that area kind of lives semi-close. My sister's daughter lives in Northridge, and both my brother's two girls, they live in Newberry Park with
So
their own
real
families. Yeah, close to Thousand Oaks. And so when we go down to see everybody, it's not difficult to see everybody. And
We usually work our way down. We have friends that live in Bend, Oregon, so we see them. And then we go down and see my sister and my friend Donna that I mentioned. They live very close together, and my sister knows Donna.
Oh, that's
So,
nice.
Oftentimes we go to Donna's house, and my sister comes over there, and we all hang out by the pool and have a good time. We practice our lemon drop recipe, which we never remember because we keep sampling the lemon drops.
So you perfect it, but don't remember the
I
perfect.
can't remember what we did. Yeah. The last time we did that,
oh, geez.
yeah, that was a traumatic night.
I came this close to not being around.
Yeah.
She had made a, what?
Yeah, Donna had made a spatchcocked chicken, and that's where they split them down the back and spread them out like that.
Yeah.
And somehow the
Tell about the
chickens,
lemon drops. That's
oh, we'd been sampling our lemon drops, so, yeah. And,
I didn't.
and he had the chicken, and somehow a little piece of chicken or something
got caught.
and so he
no.
And
was,
so
yeah.
I knew I was in trouble because I couldn't get anything in or out. And I kind of,
We're just all,
And
now my
they're
friend
giggly and
Donna,
drunk.
my friend
Oh.
Donna is a nurse, a highly trained, specialized nurse. She's sitting on one side of the table, her husband's sitting on the other. My sister and I, and then Chuck was doing this, but we don't work three sheets, we didn't know. And then
I couldn't say anything.
Jim finally said, I think something's wrong with Chuck. I looked over there and it was going,
But
so I
anyway,
started the line, I'm like, what did
yeah, she did.
But you know what, I thought it was gonna be some big thing that would come out, I didn't know it'd be just a little something, so I kept working, you know, and then I turned it over to my sister, because I was getting tired.
And she's pushing all 6 foot. And so she was taking me off the ground.
But by then it was out, because I
Yeah.
remember when it's something.
But you wanted
Yeah.
more.
And I
And
thought
so
it
I was
gonna
going
be-
like this, stop the show. But it took me probably about, 10 or 15 minutes to get my composure because, man, I mean, when I started breathing, it was just coming in as a scream. And, but the thing that really was kind of interesting was toward the end, I was probably going to black out pretty fast because I became very calm. And I saw, and I knew the people were giving me a shot, trying to do their best, but it was like okay, it's okay. It was just very weird. The panic, you know, and everything, because you really panic during those situations. But when it got calm, people that know this said, no, you came pretty close.
But the funny thing was, there's Donna watching all this going on.
She didn't help at all.
No.
But she's later on, she said, oh, Val, you were up too high. I had CPR training, so I knew where to do this, you know, but, yeah.
And unfortunately, I just have to be more careful, especially with chicken.
He's had it happen again.
2 more times.
Mhm.
And both times, luckily, she's been there. And the third time, she took care of it, and it wasn't as bad. The second time was at her aunt
My
and
uncle's
uncle's,
house.
and they're both gone now, but they were elderly, and they had
A full-time caregiver that was
Caregiver.
there.
and he was a young, strapping kid. And I did it, and he got over there, and he was able to.
And I called him over, I said, hey.
Pretty
you do
quick,
it.
pretty quick. But I'm thinking, gosh darn, I gotta veto chicken from now on, but of course I don't.
You need to veto the chicken skin. It's
Yeah.
the skin that gets you.
And you might have like damaged something.
It does, yes. Both of us had that
Yeah.
esophageal
And
ring.
so now it just catches easier.
I need to take a little break.
Yeah. Well, so the next question after your siblings was, what's the most trouble you ever got in with your siblings? Because that's usually a good story. And one that you
I have
haven't
to think about
necessarily told your children before, so.
I have to say that, I remember once, my brother should have just torn me a new one. I was probably about 13, and he was like 16 or 17, and he had a chopped BSA, that's a motorcycle with 8 hangers and it's a rigid frame and all that kind of stuff. And I would take it out once in a while when he was gone, because it didn't have an ignition, it was just a magneto type thing. So I took it out one day and I was riding around, and the cop stopped me. He said, "Where you live, son?" I said, "Up the street on Mulholland Drive." "Go home and I'm gonna be right behind you." So I get there and he gets up, he says, "Don't shut it off. When's your brother getting home?" I said, "About 15 minutes." He said, "Okay." So he talked to me, and it was, he could see that I was just kind of shook up, and I'm gonna, oh, this is coming apart. I won't be able to steal this anymore. And so he said, "Your brother's almost home, isn't he?" "Yeah. Don't do this anymore." So we get in his car, and of course I had to put it in the garage, and sure enough, my brother got home, and the bike was radiating. He said, "You've been riding, haven't you?" And I thought, gosh, he's gonna clean my clock, because he was big and strong, stronger than myself at that time. And he just locked it up. That was it, you know. No, we had a good relationship. I never, you know, and my sister, wonderful. I mean, it was a little bit more difficult because of the age group, but she was very nice, still is. And I might mention, she married her husband, Rich Jakeway. He passed. He's been gone for, what, about 12 years?
No, it hasn't been that long.
No.
5 maybe?
Rich? Really? Oh, it seems like a long time. But anyway, wonderful guy, wonderful guy. Miss him bad. She misses him more. And
We did a lot of social things with them.
a lot.
They were
of
the
plays.
people we went to plays with, went out to dinner with. We always lived about an hour away from them because we lived on the outskirts all the time. When we, see, our story is when we got married, we bought a little house in a suburb of San Fernando Valley. And we lived there in that area for about 8 years, and always with the goal to move somewhere else, out of California. It was a big out of California, which there still is, movement. And we were able to do that in 1978. We had Nikki, who was 3 at the time. We'd adopted her. She was 7 months old when we adopted her.
Where did you go into the San Fernando Valley? You lived in Simi.
No, I know, it's a suburb. It was a suburb.
Okay.
And so we moved up here, and we lived here for 5 years and did all kinds of things. And he had his own business. You know, I took care of the bookkeeping part of it. Because Nikki's Korean, we met another family that had a Korean daughter, and Nikki's still friends with her.
Oh, cool.
And from there, we started a parent support group for adoptive families, and we helped other adopted families. And we also found that there was a need for a state licensed private adoption agency, which we started.
Oh,
And
that's
placed
really
a lot
cool.
of kids. Yeah, the mother of this other little girl, she and I became good friends. And we started this adoption agency together along with some other people that we got to know. And the state helped us to get licensed, and we placed kids, and it was a real rewarding experience overall. Except that we drew the attention of the Aryan nations.
I was gonna say, had you moved up here then?
Yeah. And we got death threats from them and ended up having to testify against them because that's the federal government, you send death threats through the mail, it's a
Right.
federal crime.
Mhm.
So that happened, and that was interesting. But then we were here for 5 years, and there was a horrible recession in this area that lasted about 10 years. And it was during the time when all the industry here was a depressed industry. So it was agriculture, mining, and
Lumber.
timber.
Timber, yeah.
And so those industries were depressed to a certain extent, and it hadn't gone into tourism yet. And that was the transition that it took. So we had our own business. People who were buying from us were not paying us, so we sold that business, and we were very lucky. We sold our house and our business. After that, you couldn't sell a house here for a long time. And we moved back to California because he got his job back, just a fluke. But we couldn't afford to live where we'd lived before, so we had to move farther out. So we moved into the desert, high desert area. We were there for 20 years before we moved back here in 2003.
Which town in the high desert did you live in?
Palmdale, Quartz Hill.
Okay.
It's
That was
Lancaster's the
we've had
biggest.
9 houses, and the house in Quartz Hill was our 5th. Probably the nicest house we've ever had.
Well, we had that one custom built.
Yeah, and it was on a half acre, kind of on a hill, and we had a great view of,
Some years it was
the
terrific
center
when the
of
poppies would blow right.
Yeah, and a little
But-
valley. But sometimes, about every 5th year, the poppies were so strong because the rain and everything had come in before it got warm. And it was just a glow with orange. And
It was a timing issue. The poppies were always there, but if the timing is wrong and the weather, the weeds grow up higher and you don't
So
see
you
the
don't
poppies.
see them.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So,
bet
yeah.
that is beautiful to
We
see.
built that house with a separate quarters, so my parents who lived here could come down in the winter and stay there. So that worked out really well for about 15 years.
And then you chose to move back up here. Is that
Yeah.
when you retired that you guys moved back up
Well,
here?
he wasn't retired yet, but I took early retirement, and that was a real bonus because we got to take my medical insurance with us for both of us. And yeah, so I took early retirement, and he went to work for Beaudry Motors in Post Falls, and just for a couple of years, right? Before he retired.
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, when I was younger, I had been in the aviation, Hughes aircraft, Douglas aircraft, stuff like that. And that was good. And when we met, that's what I was doing. And, this is where we met. I was with my roommate, Bob Shankoff, in his 57 Chevrolet.
Remember all the cars.
Just like in the movies. And these 2 girls came up in a 60 Ford station wagon, red, and you were driving,
Probably.
yeah, and you and Carol. And I hadn't done this, seriously, I hadn't done this even though.
And I didn't know I was doing it because I was bringing my friend Carol home from a church dance. Didn't know about cruising.
I was shotgun, and I, the passenger, and I just said, hey, how'd you girls like to meet us at Bob's for a coffee? Bob's Big Boy.
It was a famous restaurant that everybody went to. It's like
so-
something you'd see in a movie.
And she said, no thanks. I said, man, I gotta practice. I'm not very good. And so she comes up to the next stoplight, says, make us Coca-Colas or something like, make it Cokes, and we'll meet you there. So we did. And that was neat.
And so how old were you guys when you met?
I was,
Let's see.
I was
You were
18.
21 and
No,
married, and I
we
was
got married,
25.
I was
So
18.
I was 18, so that makes me about 20.
You were 21, I think.
Yeah.
Well, we were together for several months and then we broke up and went our separate ways, and he knew he was gonna get drafted. And so the story was he couldn't make a commitment, but that was not true because he made a commitment to somebody else after me, so.
Oh, did you?
She saved me from a terrible fate, worse than death. But
So-
anyway, I came back and I got this call, and the girl that I was engaged to before I was drafted went overseas. We had broken up when we came back, and that was just fine. I mean, I liked her a lot and everything, but it would have been a disaster. And she called, or she had a friend call the house. I was staying with my parents until
My car was broken down, we were sitting there, and what did you do in those days? You had a telephone, that's what you connected with, so you got bored, you called people. So I had my friend Michelle call his number and leave a message to call Michelle at my number. So he did a few days later, and that was, I got to say
I
famous
said,
words.
when she answered the phone, I knew who it was. I said, "Hi Cindy, how are you?" or something like that. And she said, "Who's this?" I said, "It's Chuck."
You was.
And she said, "Chuck who?"
Gotta do it, you know.
Right.
Get your
Yeah,
revenge
you're gonna
where
say,
you can.
come on.
So he came over, and then I was breaking up with someone, he was breaking up with someone, so we just commiserated, and became friends.
I thought it was a
over, you know, these things.
a lot of courage on my part, because she could have killed me, right? Just boom, you're dead.
He was a bad breaker-upper. He's one of those guys that just goes, yeah.
I was gonna say, did he even break up with you, or did he just not? Oh,
stop
you
talking.
are lucky she didn't whack you one.
I never learned the finer arts of that. Anyway, as they say, that's
Well, I feel like you didn't have to because you got back together and you
Yeah.
never broke up again, so you
And
didn't have to perfect
good
it.
because we started up and it wasn't just instantaneous romance or anything, and we became
Friends.
more than friends. And it was just wonderful to be able to go over to her and after work and we would talk until 2 a.m, and it was just great. It was just great. So we got married.
You dated for a few years
Oh no.
the second time, or did you get married fast?
He got out of
I was out in probably
in September.
October or so.
So
when
it was
we were
September, I looked
married.
it up recently.
21st, February 21st.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my birthday. That's your anniversary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And so, where'd you get married at?
In Sylmar, California, in the Mormon church. Sylmar is where my folks bought their house. It was this little rural kind of olive grove neighborhood when we lived there. And, but it's in the northeast portion of the San Fernando Valley. So that's where the church was, and that's where we got married. I was no longer a participant in the church. I was set free finally, but
That is where you guys got married.
If I don't get this thing in here now, I'll never get it
yeah,
in.
there. This is the car.
When we met, I had gone through a divorce. I was married as a real young guy. And this is the car that I had.
It's his divorce.
That's your
And
divorce.
it's a 57 Chevrolet. And the guy that owned it before us had made it into a custom car, show car, and then into a drag racer. And that's what it is. There was a drag racing car that I drove in the street.
Is that you under it?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And it was great fun. You know,
Kind of
it
dusty.
was great fun. But anyway.
But you didn't keep it, you just kept the picture?
I destroyed it. It was destroyed in an accident.
Well, you didn't destroy it, it was destroyed.
No, yeah. But anyway, I remember we would date in this car. I go to work in this car, and it was ridiculously fast. I could carry the front end for about 50 feet.
Oh.
It was quick.
You should go on dates and you'd get $2 worth of gas.
Just to get to the other side of
So we could go to Hamburger Hamlet, because most of our dates were at Hamburger Hamlet.
I remember, and this is just one of the things, I've been very lucky as far as this stuff goes. I hope it doesn't jinx me on that. But I took her for a ride on the freeway in this car, and the front end is an old Model A straight axle with an ecliptic spring going across. And they're supposed to be able to get in the front and balance it like this, but it had sacked up, so it didn't do that. And I got it up to about 100 mile an hour, so top speed was about 120 because it had a 5-something rear end. It was just accelerated up to about 120, and that was it. But I hit an overpass on the way home to take her home, and I was in the fast lane. And when I hit this overpass, it was about this much of an elevation in the concrete in front of us. And I never moved the steering wheel, and it went boom, and I came down another lane, one lane over, boom, like that.
Oh, it's freaky.
And I thought, it could have been so bad. I could have gone into the wall over here, and fiberglass would have been just terrible. So I didn't do that anymore on the street. It was a very quick. I loved the car, but it was a very dangerous car because it was just not high tech. It was just.
There weren't any safety features
Yeah, I was
back
gonna
then.
say
no?
none of the safety stuff.
No, you roll it, no roll bar or anything like that. It was just not good. But it was great fun.
But did you have hamburgers at Hamburger Hamlet? Was that your favorite?
Oh, how about we had a date, one of the first dates we had, and we went to a place called the Mexican restaurant on Ventura
Yeah.
Boulevard, LT.
El Torito?
Well, I don't know.
I don't
Yeah, maybe El Torito. And I remember that we went in, and Robert Culp, an actor, and his wife at the time, France Noyen, were sitting behind us. And I did one of those things like my sister always told me never to do. Hey, Robert Culp! You know, one of those
I
things.
don't remember you doing that.
Well, anyway, it was a memorable thing. But you had to expect that kind of stuff. In the business that I got into when I got out of the
Aerospace.
aircraft industry, I got into motorcycles because I had been riding since I was 12 or so. And I did that when we had only been married a little while, because I was a real good worker in the aerospace industry, and it was a good job and all that kind of stuff.
They
but
promoted you beyond your comfort level.
they promoted me to a position that I really didn't enjoy. Before it was always a challenge. Sometimes I did big presentations for management on a multitude of different projects that they had going on, missile industry and stuff like that. And so they moved me up, so I was shuffling figures from something else to something else, and that lasted about 2 months, and I started looking. And I went into this shop, and I met this man, Norm Best, and I ended up working for that family for about 25 years, off and on here and there. But
With a 5-year gap when we moved up here.
Right.
but anyway, it was great. But I remember coming home and I said, I'm getting out of aerospace, I'm gonna go sell motorcycles.
Commission sales.
She said,
A
I
person
didn't
with,
marry this guy, and ran the wrong reason for
a
this one.
person with a little disorder needing some structure in their life too.
But
Commission
it
sales.
ended up, actually, like I said, I've been very lucky. But anyway, it ended up that aerospace went into a bad period of time, and they were laying off people like crazy. And I got into it, and then we were selling Triumphs and Yamahas. And then we dropped the Triumph line, and we took on, lucky enough, we got Harley Davidson. And that's when it all
When Harley
started
went
big time.
crazy with popularity.
Yeah, I mean, I remember selling them when they were truly not good. The old shovel head and what have you, and that was not a good engine. It was owned by a company called AMF, American Machine and Foundry. And they bought Harley when it was doing well, but they needed more, more money to make it bigger. And so AMF bought them. And they forced them into producing way too much, and the quality control was not very good at all. So when they got away from that situation and they got back into controlling their own destiny, they brought out some new stuff and lowered their production and gradually got it bigger. And I just saw it go from really junk to really very, very good. And we couldn't get enough. I became sales manager, and again, a lucky situation for me, because it was just great. It was great for, I thought, well, we're going to be lucky for about a year before, something goes wrong. It never ended. It just never ended.
Yeah, and we had learned hard lessons between the time we were up here, where financially things got really tight because of the recession. And I think so when the sales took off, we still kept living at our same level. We didn't
Right.
go crazy with that kind of stuff. We were able to put Nikki through college without having to get any student loans or any of that kind of stuff, and put money aside. So that was a good lesson to learn.
So how long were you guys married before you decided to have kids?
Well, we wanted to have children. Probably within a couple of years, we started to try to have children, and nothing was happening. And turns out both of us had issues. So, it was one of those things where, well, you can go and have artificial insemination. And I thought, well, no, why not just adopt? We didn't care where the kid came from, right?
Right.
So we started doing a big search. I mean, I wrote letters to people all over the place. Word of mouth, priests, doctors. You write all this stuff, tell them your story, and go from there. And about that time, the county of Ventura, which is when we lived in Simi Valley, that was our county, they were opening up to Korean adoptions. So they contacted us to see if we wanted to do that. And then they also were having the Vietnam baby lift at that time, so they told us to be on standby. And so we were, but all those babies that were on the baby lift had families that were waiting for them here. So that didn't happen, but we got a picture in the mail. I'll get it.
And I can remember the lady that was leading
Yeah.
us through that. Yeah, Betty Davis.
Betty Davis was our social worker.
Oh, that's a great name.
Yeah.
Easy name to remember.
And this was the picture they sent to say, do you want this baby?
Oh,
She was about 6 weeks old there.
I love it.
She was 7 months by the time we got her.
So it was quite a process.
It was, and I guess she had a cold or something, so that delayed her being able to come over. But yeah, we were on pins and needles there for quite some time.
Oh, that's so cool. And then, did you adopt a second time?
We did.
I thought
But
that Nikki had a brother.
we
moved
moved
up
up here.
And she had already started the adoption agency.
Yeah, and we didn't want to adopt a child that could be perceived as competition for the other families we were serving. So, and Chuck wanted, if we have one Korean child, we should have two. So we adopted a second Korean child,
And what's his name?
Dustin.
I don't think I've ever
There's
met
a
him.
picture.
Do they live here?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
his
Yeah, that's a
family.
whole story in itself.
Yeah.
This is
Well, that's good timing,
Hold
Mike.
it up for Ronnie.
I can do that.
Hopefully the dust motes don't show.
The way I was the light was on us there. So you said about 20 years ago?
I think so.
Family picture?
Yeah.
No, no dust shows at all.
Yeah, that was it. When we moved here the second time, neither of our kids were interested. We actually had a piece of property in Post Falls, Riverside Harbor, that we were gonna build on. But neither of the kids were interested in doing that. Nikki wanted to be in the city, and Dustin just, and this area, is probably difficult it was difficult for people who were not lily white. And so we figured, well, Dustin was in the Coast Guard in 2003. Who knew where he was going to end up? And Nikki was in Issaquah working for Macy's and really liked it there. So I thought, well, that's, my folks are here, our one brother's here. We move here, that's 4.5 hours away from her. So we can get there and whatever, She wasn't attached to anyone at that time. So we moved here. And then a few years later, she was with Mark,
That's her husband.
and we were having a conversation on the phone, and she was saying, well, Mark's dream is to have a hamburger place because he can control quality and cost. He was an executive chef for a fancy restaurant in Seattle. I said, well, Rogers is for sale. And she knew Rogers because she went first 2 years to college here at NIC.
Okay.
And I said, I know you want to stay in the city. A few days later, she called me and she said, is Rogers still for sale? I'll check it out. It was, things weren't selling well at that time. And they flew up that weekend and bought it.
That's the little
And that
one
was
on-
really fortuitous.
The Sherman
because-
one, yeah.
And my whole neighborhood over in Coeur d'Alene, we all went down there and we were cleaning and dusting, and people were honking, yay, we're coming back, because it had been sitting there for 2 years, not in business. The lady who had had it before hadn't paid her taxes and was in jail. So that was an interesting thing. But yeah, that worked out really well for Mark, because he saw the handwriting on the wall that they had a new CEO, and the way that things were going was all cost, everything had to be cut costs, and instead of quality and locally sourced, which they were trying to do at that restaurant before. So, yeah.
He got out before they would axe him.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, they were getting into the process. Actually, he had already bought this place unbeknownst to them. And they did fire him, and he was able to get
They gave him severance pay and all that kind of
sorts of
stuff.
So a lucky thing there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they've got 4 of them now, and they're doing quite well, and they've got 2 wonderful kids, just tremendous.
Yeah.
We get
And then our son got out of the Coast Guard, and then he was with Nikki in Issaquah for a while, and then when she moved here, he moved here too. So he lived with us for a few years, and he has his own place in Post Falls.
yeah.
Does he have children?
No,
No.
he's not married. I don't think he has a lot of interest in having kids.
No, he doesn't want children, but he would like to have a girlfriend. He, has had them, but they don't seem to last long.